Hi, everybody. I'm Katie Fahey.
And I'm Brittany Buford.
Welcome to Behind the Ballot. We're the co founders of our national Respect Voters Coalition, and Behind the Ballot is our podcast about democracy reform on a local, state, and national level. We wish we were joined today by our other co host, Benjamin Singer, but Brittany and I are going to handle this episode.
Absolutely, Katie. We've both seen injustice and how democracy works, and we've taken steps to reform and improve democracy in areas close to us.
I'm the executive director of an organization called The People. We're nonpartisan and we gather and enable everyday Americans to find common ground and take action together to create a government that is truly of, by, and for the people.
Yeah, I'm a managing partner with Partners in Democracy. We're focused on democracy renovation that connects people to their civic experience and power and redesigns our political institutions and civic infrastructures. This is episode 6 of Behind the Ballot. Today, we're talking with Bonnie Miller, president of League of Women Voters, um, chair of Save Arkansas Democracy, and which is a campaign to protect ballot initiatives in Arkansas. And we're also joined by David Couch, one of the leaders of the ballot committee, Save Arkansas Democracy, and also their attorney. Hey, David. Hey, Bonnie.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having us.
We're so excited. So, starting off, you guys are here on a day and fighting for something that I really admire because it's not only trying to right a wrong in your state that has happened from the legislature, but it's actually also trying to fight for something more proactive, so that we can hopefully prevent future attacks for weakening citizens' right to use the ballot initiative process. Um, so I love that because I think a lot of times sometimes we're forced to only play defense, but in this case we get to do that while also looking out for generations of future voters and their ability and right to decide if they want to use the initiative process to legislate on something. But before we hop into that current work, I think I would love to hear from both of you a little bit about what brought you into politics, what brought you into the democracy reform space, what ballot initiatives have you cut your teeth on? It's not many people just can go to school and say, I'm going to go work on only ballot initiatives. And so would love to hear a little bit just about how you came to be here.
Yeah, I live in Arkansas now. I live in the Northwest Arkansas area. But I am originally from Southern California. I was born and raised there and did my undergrad there and actually moved out to Arkansas for graduate school thinking, oh, I'll be there for just a few years and come back home. Y'all can see how that worked out. I'm obviously still here. I fell in love with the state. And something that I think I kind of took for granted growing up in California, where all of because direct democracy is there. But there were so many, vote no or vote yes on prop this or prop that. Like I grew up with that and I just sort of took it for granted. And then when I was here for graduate school, it's very different. The how direct democracy works, that was like an intro for me that, oh, so this works really, it's very different in each state that has it. And so I was just kind of minding my own business in grad school, doing my grad school thing. And I became very interested in redistricting, how it worked, and how to make it better. And so there was a talk that evening, or an evening that week, put on by the local League of Women Voters chapter, and it was all about an independent redistricting commission, how they worked, how we could get one here in Arkansas. And so I made a plan to attend, and I showed up that evening. I think was it at St. Paul? It was at like a local church in the area, that they had this program. And I showed up that evening, and David was actually the speaker, and that was in
I love that.
2017. That was
Wow.
the first time I ever laid eyes on him. And that was also the night that I joined the League of Women Voters. I spoke to some very nice women there that evening, they before I knew it, I had signed up to do voter registration. I had done a lot by the time that
Organizers know how to get you, huh?
they do. They just absorbed me right in. And honestly, like it has just been, I'm incredibly grateful because essentially the rest is history. From that moment, I was working, I joined the league to work on specifically getting an independent redistricting commission in the state. Um, and so yeah, I worked over the next couple of years with David and through the league to get that on the ballot eventually in 2020. That that work really ramped up and we did qualify for the ballot. It was actually the year I also got to meet Katie virtually. It was a very strange time to be really launching a campaign in the midst of COVID. But that was my real like my first campaign that I was involved in our
Wow.
it was called Arkansas Voters First, and so that was really where I got my the most experience that I had had, and was really fortunate to be able to work with David again, just a great team. Um, and then we were disqualified for a hyper technicality, and for me, I know for a lot of us at that time, that was really the point at which we're like, okay, so we have to do something, right? I mean, we can't just accept this. And so David's history is a lot more extensive than mine. His spans decades. Mine is not that long, but I will let you try to wrap up your few decades and
I'll try to be brief. One thing that Bonnie has impressed upon me or forced me to do is be more brief. So,
it's like bullet points.
I'm a trial lawyer by trade, so we talk forever, you know. So the first initiatives that I did, like I said earlier, was in the mid 90s. Um, we skipped over, and then in 2012, in Arkansas, since the Civil War, we had been a blue Democratic state. But it was clear that politics were changing in Arkansas, and that if we were ever going to do anything more to protect people, we had to do it through the initiative and referendum process. And so the very first measure that we did in 2012 was campaign finance measure. Try to restrict lobbyist gifts, try to restrict corporate contributions to candidates, and things like that. We didn't qualify for the ballot on that one, but during that process, I met the people who were doing medical marijuana in Arkansas, and I knew it was going to be an uphill battle, but it was really fun and really interesting. And we collected and we qualified for the ballot on the medical marijuana, and everybody thought we would lose, and we lost by 40,000 votes statewide
Ah,
in this old red southern state. Um, and 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 so I became addicted to the process then. So in 2014, we raised the minimum wage through an initiative. I tried to turn our entire state wet and failed because we're kind of backwards. We have wet counties and dry counties. 2016, I did the medical marijuana again, and this time we passed. So we have a constitutional amendment. And so since 2016, Arkansas has had access to medical marijuana. 2018, we tried to do campaign finance reform. The Attorney General wouldn't approve our ballot title. So we were just looking for something to do. So we raised the minimum wage again. And then in 2020, actually in 2017, we started working on the Independent Redistricting Commission. And we worked hard with all of the national partners, as you know them all well. And we got that on the ballot, and it was disqualified for a technicality. And the General Assembly in starting in 2012, when we almost legalized medical marijuana, began making our process much more difficult every time. And so when they took us off in 2012, we knew we had to do something to protect the process.
Yeah.
So we started working on Save Our Democracy, the initiative and referendum that we have now with respect to a ballot measure for ballot measures.
Mhm.
That is awesome. It seems like both of you have done some deep and important work. And you guys have both spent some time just now highlighting both the difficulty of ballot initiatives and passing them, especially in states such as Arkansas. But you've also highlighted the importance of them. why they are so important. You guys have talked about minimum wage and marijuana and redistricting. And unfortunately, now you guys are at a point where you're facing a major attack on the ballot initiative process itself in Arkansas. The legislature has continued and been successful in weakening the citizens' rights to use the ballot initiative process within the state. So I want to talk a bit about that and ask you guys to go through a bit of the history of this process. What have we seen and what are we looking forward to in terms of this process, and why does it remain important for these citizens?
Yeah, so we've seen the process change a lot, I think, especially in the last 2 decades. We've seen a lot of legislation around the process, a lot of rules change. Um, and, as David alluded before, um, we really started thinking about, okay, what would a proactive ballot measure look like in 2020 when we got kicked off of the ballot? And so we started having conversations internally and with in-state stakeholders, with national folks, national experts in the process, and started to think about, okay, so if we do a proactive measure, what components do you think about including? Because there weren't any other models in the country to look at. So where do we start? Because we know there are a lot of things that we have issues with, right? But you also have to think about crafting an amendment that will pass and that has, broad bipartisan support. So a lot of the things that, we essentially take issue with almost everything. Well, we know that, well, there are some people who don't necessarily think that some of those things are a problem. So how do we strike this balance? And we know that we needed to focus really heavily on banning the General Assembly from being able to interfere with the process. So we knew that was priority number one, was keeping them from being able to interfere, from them being able to amend or repeal a constitutional amendment that's already been passed by the people, being able to pass laws to change the process. So we knew that that was number one. And then there were so many laws that have changed. And David just did this great legislative history for our lawsuit that we have filed in federal court challenging a lot of these statutes. And so he has more info and research on the actual laws that have changed over the last couple of decades. And so I'll let him speak more to that. But we knew then that we needed to make a change, that we needed to have this proactive measure. And then it was sort of like, okay, so what do we include? Let's look at what has changed over the years. What are sort of like the dreams, and what can we take from other states? Because we know that this isn't happening just to us. So we have to look at what's happening in other states as well to think about, okay, how do we craft this amendment that is not only a response, right, but also, like y'all said, will protect generations of voters to come. So I'll let you speak more to the why of how the process has changed in the last couple of decades.
Well, the first question was, why is this important? And I can tell you in Arkansas why it's important, because in 2012, out of 1 million votes cast for medical marijuana, we lost by 30,000. In 2014, we raised the minimum wage with over 60% of the people voted for it, and hadn't raised the minimum wage in 30 years. In 2018, we came back and raised the minimum wage again, and nearly 70% of the people voted for it.
Wow.
Nearly 60% of the people voted for medical marijuana in 2016 when it passed. And in 2018, nearly 60% of the people voted to allow casino gaming in Arkansas. So you would think a red southern state, those things don't pass. So we don't have an issue with the people of the state of Arkansas, because they've shown that it's progressive. And the why is we passed all of those bills, and the General Assembly tried to undo the minimum wage both times. No one ever introduced a bill with respect to medical marijuana, even though it nearly passed. And we never would have got casino gaming through the General Assembly. Redistricting, we got taken off the ballot, but the polling indicated we would 60% plus of people would have voted for it in
And really
Arkansas.
quick, David, on that, I mean, you guys got the signatures, if I remember
We
correctly,
got the
right?
signatures.
You had thousands of people say, yes, we absolutely want a chance to vote on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And ranked choice voting.
And
They were
ranked choice voting.
they were both on the ballot. Same.
Yeah.
And so why it's important is the politicians, the General Assembly, the politicians are not going to do it. And it's clearly the results show that the people want these measures. They want these progressive measures. I mean, we've tried so many in the last couple of years that have just been, defeated by the process and not by the people.
Yeah.
And that's what we really need to do. So, we want the people to rule, not the process. And so, the General Assembly has made the process almost difficult to do. So, we filed a lawsuit in federal court. Thank you so much for your affidavit. It will
No
help.
problem.
You're welcome. And then so we go back to direct the specifics of the measure is our initiative and referendum first came about in 1910, and it was kind of poorly drafted at the time, and it has a kind of a loophole in it, which indicates that even though if we pass an initiated constitutional amendment, the General Assembly can change it by 2/3 vote. Our Attorney General has already said that he believes that as well. There's a case pending in front of the Supreme Court, and I'm afraid at any moment now, our Arkansas Supreme Court will say that the General Assembly can change a constitutional amendment with a 2/3 vote. So the very, very first thing and the most important thing that our amendment does is it makes sure that the General Assembly cannot change a constitutional, amendment by a 2/3 vote.
Leaving that power just within
Yeah,
the
keep the
people.
power.
The people of
Absolutely.
the state
Yeah.
could vote to the people that say could still vote to change the Constitution, but it's only them that has the authority.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Only the people can do that.
People. Yeah.
And so then, some of the other reforms we did is like, we want to make sure that it's the right to petition is a fundamental right. I think it is anyhow.
Federal Constitution seems to think so.
I know. And so the way we did that in our amendment is we said that the General Assembly can pass laws that affect the process, but they must be for a legitimate government purpose and narrowly tailored to meet that purposes. And as everybody knows, that's the strict scrutiny standard. So one, if they pass a law, it's going to have to chin that bar. But the other thing that we put in our amendment that is a little bit unique is that any laws that the General Assembly passes in the future that affects the initiative and referendum process automatically refer to the voters for approval. They do not become effective until we the people actually approve it. So if there are going to be changes to the process, we get to do that. There's some other things, but you go.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's I mean that's a lot of the why. And also we don't have much of a process after this year. We just had a legislative session, and the General Assembly passed 14 new laws to make the process more difficult. And so
Wow.
wow, it takes so much time. It is a lot. So it is also
Bonnie, can you highlight some of those ways that the legislature does try to make the process harder?
Yes, so it is it is wild this session. So we used to have all the things, we used to have pay per signature, those were struck down in 2021. We haven't had that in a while. This most recent session this year, they added quite a bit. I will say the three that stand out really stand out. Now we have to check photo ID before somebody signs a petition. We did not have to do that before. We have to verify photo ID. Even
Ooh.
parties don't have to do that when they're petitioning to get on the ballot. They don't even have to check photo ID. But the people are subject to different rules than parties and candidates, which isn't entirely surprising, I guess. So we have to now check.
I mean, I don't know your state well enough, but I would assume that to qualify for a constitutional amendment, you have to gather a lot more signatures than a party does.
Oh, absolutely. We have to gather 90,704 signatures from registered voters across 50 of our 75 counties.
And the party is 6,000.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a pretty
6,000.
it's a pretty heavy lift. Pretty heavy
13 times.
lift. So now we have to check for photo ID before somebody can sign the petition. The next thing is that we have to either read the entire ballot title to them out loud, or they can read it on their own. And I think a lot of people, when they hear read ballot title, oh, it's like a sentence, it's like a title. It is not. It is an entire sheet of paper. Often for some measures, it is several pages of text, single space, because our ballot titles in Arkansas have to include everything. It has to be essentially a summary of the measure, because that is what you see on your polling machine when you go, to the ballot box. You see the ballot title, which is the summary. So it's quite long. So to read this out loud to somebody, we timed ourselves reading it out loud, and it was 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that's you're adding that already to this interaction. Now they can choose to read it themselves, and most folks do choose to read it to themselves, but even that is still adding time. So there's that new rule, and then the other big one, can see people's eyes get big when you tell them, like, ugh. So we now have to tell them that petition fraud is a Class A misdemeanor. So that is
Trying to scare people.
trying to scare
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, really trying to chill the people who are willing to sign, and then also people who are willing to canvass, because not only does it freak people out who are going to sign, it freaks people out who are willing to canvass for us. And like, I don't want to be committing fraud, even accidentally. I don't want to facilitate that. So that there's also that challenge. So I would say it's at least doubles the amount of time that it takes, the interaction when you're with somebody to get a signature, versus the previous way. So it is, it's certainly a deterrent.
And to me, the other thing it does, it also eliminates the ability to carry two petitions at the same time, because you'd have to do that process twice. Nobody's going to sit there that long.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you're asking people to stop doing whatever they were already doing,
Yeah.
which wasn't in most cases coming to stand in line to gather your, sign something.
No, especially when you're talking about the middle of summer, outside, it is hot. Yeah.
Totally. Oh my goodness. So will this be able to undo any of that, or would those have to be future ballot initiatives to undo some of those?
Yeah. Do you want to?
Sure. So all of those issues are part of the lawsuit that we filed in federal court here. So we're seeking injunctive relief against those. We didn't specifically repeal those in the amendment themselves, but by setting up this legal standard that exists, if we don't beat them this time, I think we'll beat them the next time. But I'm fairly confident that they're unconstitutional, and I think that the district court in Arkansas is unconstitutional. Some of the old laws in Arkansas, the paid canvasser laws, they were very similar to the ones that were in South Dakota. And South Dakota court held those to be unconstitutional, and even the Eighth Circuit affirmed them. So there are some laws that we've challenged in our lawsuit that I know we're going to win, because even the Eighth Circuit has said they're unconstitutional.
Yeah. And again, when thinking about what to include in the amendment, we certainly didn't make decisions solely based on polling, but polling helps to inform, right? It lets us know
Totally.
what our
Where are the people at?
Right. What Arkansans across the state are thinking and feeling. It's a pretty rural state here. And so, what we saw, was, again, where there were some things where, of course, we thought that needs to go, or specifically, an example is like the geographic distribution. We have a lawsuit challenging the geographic distribution. It was previously, we had to collect in 15 counties. The state changed that a couple years ago by statute, to 50, and we are challenging that in court. But when thinking about, do we want to include that in our amendment, it's like, well, we've had a couple of cycles now since that has passed, and a lot of campaigns have collected in those counties. And what we saw was that it's a real balancing act, that when you start to include some things in the amendment, right, like overall support might kind of go down from folks somewhere else on the political spectrum. And so it's really like, what is the best product that we can put forth with the most support that is really is meaningful to the process and is good for the people. And so we feel really strongly with what we've put out. And we did it together. We developed this lawsuit and proactive ballot measure at the same time in tandem, knowing this is, part of like a two-part strategy. Because we knew we couldn't include everything in the amendment that we would love, because it just wouldn't pass. And so it was kind of like, okay, so what do we attack on, constitutionality? What do we want to put in the Constitution? And so it took years. This has been years in the making. So all that to answer the why now.
Well, and the one other why we haven't talked about that is
Yeah.
everybody has a ballot title. And so in Arkansas, the Attorney General has to approve our ballot title, and he's been very strict in the past about making you rewrite your measure and before you get your ballot title approved. And then even if you get it approved, the Supreme Court, after you collected all your signatures, can remove a measure, says it's a bad ballot title. So in this last cycle, medical marijuana tried to expand their program, spent $2 million, collected all the signatures, qualified for the ballot, and the Supreme Court said, well, I don't like your ballot title, and didn't let people vote on it. So we, in our amendment, we've taken that ballot title process and we've actually put it in the Constitution. We've put guardrails around it, and we've put some protections. We've put immediate rights to appeal to the Supreme Court, so that once you get your ballot title approved when our amendment passes, it can't be taken off. So you can come in, you can collect signatures, that, and you've been involved in a lot of national campaigns. That national funders, they don't want to spend a lot of money to be ripped off at the last second by the Arkansas Supreme Court. So, it gives you some security. It gives the people that help fund these things some security as well. And one of the other laws that the General Assembly passed this time is that all the ballot titles have to be written at the 8th grade reading level. And it has it's the flesh something test. I forget the flesh Kincaid test.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. They didn't think we would meet it, but with our Save Our Democracy amendment, we met it.
Hey,
Even though they were really surprised when we met it. So, once you figure out how the tests work, you can work on the words, and, there's going to be some amendments we'll never be able to make it. But we did it, and I know that the Attorney General, when we slid that under his door at the 8th grade reading level, was just like,
yeah. And we did that with volunteers. I mean, we did that.
Yes,
Our
love that.
volunteers wrote the ballot title, so that's pretty incredible.
Volunteers are
I was having a
amazing.
hard time doing it, so I just sent it to some league members who were like college professors and high school teachers, and they're like, "Oh, here, easy."
Leave it to the educators.
Leave it to the teachers. Yeah.
Totally.
That's
Totally.
fantastic.
I think
everyone needs to be involved.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was going to say, on top of funders, I mean, it's also frustrating for everyday citizens to spend all that time and energy and creativity to talk to thousands of people across their state. I mean, they could be doing anything else with their days and nights and weekends. And yet then, you clearly see that there's 100,000-ish people who want to be able to actually vote on this. And instead of being able to vote on it, you have a Supreme Court that just kicks it off like it's nothing. Like it didn't just take millions of dollars and thousands of, your own state citizens' hours and time and all of that. Especially if they got to sit there now and listen to you read the whole ballot title.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you're having people volunteer to do this, to be kicked off is it's devastating. It's devastating.
Yeah, it is. So I love the ability. I hope that can go through too, because like I know in Michigan we face similar things where it's always a little iffy even after you gather the signatures, and it's very frustrating and hard, and it makes people feel discouraged. Like, why even bother if all this might, not even be able to lead to this effort, which is what I love about the ballot initiative process in general. It allows you there, if you can write constitutional language, gather a bunch of signatures, we actually have a way to bypass the legislature. It's going to be used for everything, but when there are these important issues like you were bringing up, David, that people clearly, over 50% of people, the vast majority of people, 70% you mentioned as one of the ballot initiatives, want something, and the legislature isn't ruling on it, we have the ability to do that. So anyways, just appreciate what you guys are doing.
Go ahead,
David.
Yeah, the pain y'all experienced in Michigan and Ohio and Nebraska and South Dakota, Montana, all of the states that have the initiative. That's we looked at all of those states developing this, like, okay, let's do a universal fix here.
Yeah, I
Sure, I
love it.
forget about my
And that's
neighbor state.
we know at the Respect Voters Coalition, Brittany and I have heard this
Yeah.
tons. Like people are looking for examples of that because they are sick of playing defense and they want to be proactive in this way. So I think that's not only will it be important for folks who live in Arkansas, but I truly think that if you guys are successful, this will help set a new precedent across the entire country, which is super exciting. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know we've heard a lot about the proposal itself, so I think we've got a good handle of what's in it. But what stage are you guys at in the campaign? Can you elaborate more on what the process looks like and what you're currently trying to do?
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat that? You went out just a
Oh,
little
I'm sorry.
the
Yeah,
last
yeah. I was just
question.
saying, I know we heard a lot about what was in the policy in the proposal, but what stage of the campaign are you guys in?
Yes, so really exciting. So our ballot title was approved. Gosh, was it like 4 weeks ago now? 4 weeks ago now. We had our official campaign launch on June 13th. We've officially been out in the
Woohoo!
field collecting signatures, yes, since June 13th. We're across the state now. We have volunteers all over Arkansas collecting. We're doing trainings every week, at least 2 a week, training volunteers. We're getting people staffed up at all of the events across the state because it's summer. There's a lot of festivals and fairs and just fun stuff. We were at Pride this last weekend in Northwest Arkansas and had an amazing, amazing weekend. We collected, I think, from at least like 20 different counties in this one area of the state. So
Awesome. Love
that was
that.
amazing. So we're rolling. We are out there. We're actively recruiting volunteers, training. We have until July 3rd of next year to collect. Um, so we're glad that we're starting earlier than usual, and we know it's going to take all of that time to collect because we only have volunteer canvassers right now, and of course it's just taking longer with all of the new rules. So but we're out there. We're it full on, and it's amazing to see all of the energy and support. It's people get it. They get it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, what our General Assembly did last time in enacting all these horrible laws has created such a uproar in with the normal people. I mean, we had a booth at the Pride Fest, and I mean, people were lined up to sign it. And
Love that.
and we would say, "I'm sorry, you have to read this, or I have to ask for your photo ID." And they're like, "I'm like, why?" And I'm like, "Well, because this is how we change that. This is," and so we were using the laws that they did, and our explanation is motivation for them to
That's
sign it, and
smart.
then they would send their friends over, and so
Yeah.
it's there was a great eagerness for this petition.
Yeah, I don't think, we were canvassing all weekend. It was busy, it was hot. And of course this is I guess quote unquote like a friendlier event. But I did not encounter a single person who declined to sign the petition. Like David said, we had
I
people
love
waiting
it.
in line and people knew. And that was one of the things that we worried about because this is less of a sexy issue, right? Like this is a process issue. It's very in the weeds. And so, when we were thinking about, okay, what are our talking points? How do we quickly explain this? People aren't going to get it. Oh, they got it. They came up to sign. They were like, I know, I'm here. I want to sign it. I don't care. Here, like they came with their IDs ready. They're ready to read that ballot title. So that was amazing. I mean, the people are upset. They understand what's at stake. And so that was really, I mean, we knew that. we knew that because we're out there and we've seen the polling. But I think that was really just like especially heartening. And of course, when you're out in like 90 degrees and just like profusely sweating, it's really nice to have people who are excited about signing your petition instead of having people just actively ignoring you. And yeah, so it's
I
been
feel
really
that.
great to see all of the organic enthusiasm around this.
Love to hear that.
Yes, fantastic. Yeah, I think it's really great, like how you guys have really been able to highlight for people and for the citizens exactly how this process can affect them, whether that's voting rights. And David, you mentioned earlier reduction of money within politics through campaign finance laws, changing the primary system. You mentioned RCV earlier. All of these reforms are around accessibility of this work. And it's both refreshing and honestly really cool to hear that people are grasping this so tightly to the chest. For those that haven't quite gotten to that point, and I know you mentioned that you hadn't had anyone that hasn't signed it, but for those who may be like skeptical or still trying to figure out exactly how this will affect them, like what do you guys say to those folks, and how can you and how can other campaigns and states that are battling this and working through this process get people involved?
Yeah, I think, that's of course just like a universal struggle right now, like getting folks engaged in the process and in politics because everything feels very polarized right now. And so what we're really stressing to our volunteers, to our volunteer canvassers, um, is that we don't want to frame this in a negative way, right? Like we want to make sure that we're framing this in a positive way that is empowering to people, because it's really easy to talk about everything that is wrong and scary and say you need to sign this because if you don't, right, like all these horrible things will happen. But I think what is resonating with folks more is, here's how this process is empowering, here's what it gives you, and here's power that you may not even know that you had. Because I think what we're discovering and what we've kind of always known is that not everyone in the state, and I'm sure not everyone in even all the states that have this process, understand it, know what it means, know how powerful it is. So there's just a lot of education that's happening, just letting folks know, like, you're not powerless. In the state of Arkansas, you have this incredible tool at your disposal. And this is how we strengthen it, right? And if you want to do all of these things, wherever you fall across the political spectrum, if there's a policy that is important to you and has a lot of support, you can do this. You don't need the legislature to do it. And so we're finding that a lot of those conversations that are just framed that way in a more positive, empowering way, it just resonates more. And that's the way that we're getting folks engaged, is just through that like positive framing.
Yeah, it really is a nonpartisan issue. This is purely policy because, as I said earlier, until 2012, for 150 years, the Democrats were in charge of Arkansas, and the conservative Republicans got their issues on the ballot in the 90s and got to vote on them. A lot of them, passed. Most of them passed if they got on the ballot. And so, you know, we're not ever going to stay the same. And so
Mhm.
those people that are convincible, you can just say, yeah, you're in charge today, but in 10 years it might be different. And if you so mess up this process, you can't use it. So, the convincible people, there's a segment that you're just not ever going to convince. But that's that little bitty segment right there that you get them easy when they figure out just a policy issue because, last cycle we try to do some transparency, a constitutional amendment for government transparency and freedom. And so I bonded with people that are not normally in my circle because it was really a nonpartisan issue. And those same groups of people now that you would never think would support something that I would support, are right behind in it and giving us go, and willing to support it, a lot of conservatives, lots of people. So it's really a nonpartisan power to the people.
Yeah, that's why ballot measures are so effective at organizing, right? Because if you have a ballot measure, it should be something theoretically, right, that has a lot of support across across the spectrum. So it's a way that people can organize around one, policy issue, can agree on that. And so I think there's a lot of potential there also just in the state, to be working across the aisle and bringing more folks together. So yeah, that's all really exciting.
Yeah, and you know that a lot of people that are labeled as conservatives support this because our General Assembly has 17% Democrats and 83% Republicans. And so to go out and get 80% on an issue to raise the minimum wage, I got a lot of those votes.
There's
Right.
also
Well, I think that's like a lot of people try to pretend that like
Yeah.
being a Democrat or a conservative means one thing. And we as voters are there. We do not just have two ways of looking at the world here in America. Like there are so many, and I'm sure people in different parts of Arkansas feel differently about issues.
Sure.
And that is like a wide spectrum of beliefs that can care passionately about lots of different issues, even if nationally it wouldn't be deemed as blue or red.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and of course, we always talk about, well, remember when we were close to getting an independent redistricting commission? Remember when we were close to having rankings? We can still have those wonderful things.
Right.
We just have to protect the process first. So yeah, I do. I think a lot of people understand, even more so than I thought that they would, which is great.
That's great. That's really great. Well, Bonnie and David, we know, especially kind of from a national lens, that there were a lot of ballot initiatives in 2024 around democracy reform. And unfortunately, a lot of those were not successful. But would love to know kind of how you guys may or may not be informing your campaigns from the ones that were run. And what do you think you guys need in order to be successful for 2026?
Yeah, I think I think the easy and true also true answer is money. Unfortunately.
And bodies.
Yeah, we need people and money.
And
So printing petitions is costly. It's a little less than $3 a petition. And because in Arkansas we have to have everything attached to the petition, it's about like 8 pages, double-sided. So um
That's a big petition.
thick little packet. And so, it costs money to print them and then to get them across the state. So, and that every dollar that we're raising is going straight to that. So, of course, we need money to get, to collect signatures just to print the petitions. We need volunteers. What else do we need? Money, people.
people, I mean,
Yeah, money and people, which
just chatter.
yeah.
It's the rising tide lifts all boats, and to answer your question, yeah, we looked at all of the campaigns and you see the messaging and you see the faults and you see not the faults, the mistakes, we learn from our mistakes. And so,
Totally.
hopefully,
There's yeah.
if we get on the ballot, we'll win.
There's a lot.
I'm just telling you, we get on the ballot, we win. We will not lose this.
A lot of lessons learned from the campaigns that ran last cycle in 24. We saw with the abortion amendment that was being run last year, that had a huge volunteer base, and a lot of those volunteers have come over to work on our campaign. They have a lot, they're really fired up over what happened, and they had a technicality, they didn't end up making the ballot. But those were very engaged folks. And so we're learning a lot from them, what worked well last year, what didn't. And of course, you have to scale that to your own campaign because abortion is a very different policy topic
Right.
than direct democracy reform. And we're working on a different timeline. So there's a different cadence to everything. And so, of course, it's every campaign is different. The time, but we are really taking a lot of those lessons learned because every campaign is underfunded, right? It just is. We're always working with not enough money, not enough people, not enough time. And so we don't have the ability to just reinvent the wheel. So we're trying to take best practices, capitalize on a lot of the momentum from last year, and then scale that, for this year. And like I said, we have, gosh, tomorrow will be no, today is a year. We have a year from today. That's really exciting.
Ooh.
We have 1 year.
365 days.
Year. So
I mean,
Yeah,
it sounds like that's like, only less than even a signature a day. You guys got this.
it is. It sounds good. Oh my gosh. We need to be out there right now.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Both of you have to meet
Yeah.
your quota tonight.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
But what we tell all these other groups, that maybe single issue like the abortion or independent redistrict or some people that's just their thing, it's like you're not ever going to be able to do your thing unless you do our thing first.
Yeah, it's one
Yeah.
of those, like, it feels like almost like natural coalition building in a way, because
Yeah.
it's
It
like,
is.
put
Yeah.
aside all of our extremely different, maybe political views, even. This is a
Exactly.
right for all of us to be able
Yeah.
to be heard, which I feel like with democracy issues, it can often come back to that, except like this one is really core. Like, it's everybody's
Yeah.
ability to even access a process. So,
Yeah. And I feel like everyone understands, right? That like we all agree we don't want like politicians to have all this power. Like
right.
we can all agree on that. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. Awesome. Um, you guys have been absolutely amazing in giving us information and sharing and telling us the history of the ballot measures and how people or what you need from people getting involved, people and money, right? But as we start to wind down, I want to talk about how people can get involved when those folks want to bring their money or want to bring themselves to go out, volunteer, get signatures. What does that take, and how can folks get in touch with you?
I love this question. So people can find us at Save Our Democracy. It's saveardemocracy.org. We have links to everything there, links to donate, links to sign up to volunteer, links to sign up to our mailing list. All of those things are incredibly helpful. We know that when national folks are looking at giving money, it's not always the amount that you're raising in state that they're looking at, it's the amount of individual donors. So if there are people out there who are listening and want to give us $2, $5, we would be so grateful to get that. And you'd also pay for a petition. So that would be amazing. Um, Volunteers, again, we need folks who not only are willing to go out and collect signatures, because we know that's not everyone's bag, and that's fine. We have what we want to put our introverted folks somewhere. So you can help by distributing, collecting petitions, driving them across the state. If there are folks who want to volunteer their notary services or find notaries for us, there's so many different ways to help. It's not just signature collection. So find us online, sign up for our mailing list. That's really helpful. Just spread the word. And I always, of course, tell people that the low-hanging fruit is to find us on social media and to share out our content, because I don't understand the algorithms at all. I don't know that anybody does, but I do know that the more people that engage with those posts, the more people who see them. And that's where we're putting a lot of our info. We're putting volunteer canvasser trainings there. We're putting different opportunities to collect signatures on those social media platforms. So that's honestly the best way to find us. And then, of course, money. Nobody likes to talk about that, but we need the money. So
it's real. I mean, like you just said, even $3 a petition is a lot when you
$3.
need a lot of petitions.
Exactly. Each petition holds 10 signatures. So, you want to print out one petition for us, that would be incredible. Incredible. So
That's fantastic.
Fantastic. Well, Bonnie and David, thank you so much for joining us today. And please, everybody, check out their work, share it on social media at the very least, let other people know, especially if you have friends or family in Arkansas or you or yourself are there, make sure you look up for it. I just want to say thank you both for your legacies of helping fight for these changes, but particularly for this kind of ballot initiative, like we already mentioned, but like you are helping hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in the future be able to actually access direct democracy with the hard work and hours you are putting in now in the heat. My goodness. At least even in Michigan today, it's like 90. So I can't even imagine what it is in Arkansas, but it matters and it counts. And these rights we all only have them because people before us were willing to fight for them. So thank you guys so much.
Well, and thank you so much. It's because of spaces like this and because of folks like you both, and especially you, Katie, I met you 5 years ago, that we're able to keep doing this work and be able to have these conversations with other folks, in different states, share best practices, have this space, and that's so important. So thank you very much for having these organizations, Respect Voters, the people, Partners in Democracy. Thank you so much, because there's such valuable spaces for practitioners, and we don't have anything else, right? Like, these are so helpful. So just thank you for highlighting this work, and thank you for creating these places for us to share. So thank you so much, Brittany, Katie. Really appreciate it.
So,
Yes, thank you.
yeah.
And if you guys are listening out there and you want to be a part of these really wonderful spaces, the Respect Voters Coalition has room for everybody, practitioners. If you just want to learn more about the ballot initiative process, if you want to come find some amazing campaigns across the country that are fighting for the ballot initiative process or for good governance reform in general, you can find us at respectvoters.org. And we are excited for this road ahead together and what we can do. And big part of our coalition is sharing best practices, helping highlight and support in ways that we can across the country. Because as Americans, we believe that folks should have the right to petition. So thank you again. I'm Katie Fahey.
And I'm Brittany Buford, signing off from Behind the Ballot, reminding everyone that all political power is inherent in the people, and reminding our leaders that they need to respect voters.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. Enjoy your weekends.
Happy
You
4th.
Happy
too.
4th, Independence
Yes.
Day.
Yes. And good luck gathering petitions. I hope it's very
Thank
successful.
you. Yeah, we're gonna
Thanks,
Five
guys.
minutes at a time. My gosh. I didn't realize that for some reason.
That's
It's wild. It is it's wild. Yeah.
To have to read the whole title. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily,